The air is thick with dust and the scent of something old, something forgotten. The human steps carefully over jagged stone, his boots crunching against the debris of a civilization long gone. The towering ruins stretch high above him, strange markings carved deep into the metallic walls, glowing faintly as if whispering secrets from another time. He wipes sweat from his brow, adjusting the strap of his gear, his scanner beeping wildly. But the readings make no sense, energy signatures fluctuating like a pulse, erratic, alive. He moves deeper into the ruin, his breath steady, his heartbeat a steady rhythm against the eerie silence. Something about this place feels off, as if the walls are watching him. The deeper he goes, the more the air hums with an unseen force, something powerful, something waiting. Then he sees it resting on a pedestal covered in layers of dust, a bracelet, smooth, metallic, and shimmering with an unnatural glow, its surface shifting like liquid silver, reflecting light that isn't there. He hesitates, instincts screaming at him to leave it alone, but the pull is too strong. He reaches out, fingers grazing the cool metal. A sudden shock jolts through him like lightning up his arm. He flinches, but before he can pull away, the bracelet tightens around his wrist, locking in place. The hum in the air turns into a deafening raw energy crackling around him. The ruins tremble, dust and debris falling from above. His vision blurs, light erupts, blinding, searing, burning into his mind. And then silence. He stumbles back, gasping. The ruins are still again, but something feels different, something in his chest, an odd sensation like another heartbeat, echoing his own. Then a sharp gasp cuts through the silence. Not his own. He spins around, eyes widening as she appears before him, a girl. No, an alien, glowing violet eyes wide with shock, silver hair flowing as if caught in an invisible current, her skin marked with intricate patterns, pulsating with the same glow as the bracelet. Her gaze locks onto his wrist, and she freezes. Her mouth opens and closes before she finally finds her voice. Her words come out in rapid, panicked bursts, a language he doesn't understand. But her tone is clear, fear, disbelief, absolute terror. She takes a step forward, shaking her head, hands trembling before she does something unexpected. She lunges, grabbing his wrist, yanking at the bracelet, her fingers digging into his skin as she tries to rip it off. Nothing happens. She lets out a choked sound of frustration, tries again, harder. Still nothing. She looks up at him, eyes burning with something wild, something desperate, her hands gripping his arm so tightly he can feel her shaking. Her next words are slower, deliberate, almost pleading. But he still doesn't understand. He opens his mouth to speak, to ask what the hell is going on. But before he can get a single word out, a wave of energy slams into him. His knees buckle, his vision darkens, something surges between them, a connection unseen but undeniable. His pulse matches hers, his breath sinks with hers, an unfamiliar sensation flooding his mind, something vast, something ancient, something binding. Panic grips his chest as realization sets in. This isn't just some artifact. This isn't just some alien relic. He has no idea what he has just done, but one thing is certain: he is no longer alone. The air is still charged with the remnants of the light that brought her here. The alien girl, her eyes wide and shimmering with unspoken fears, stares at him as if he is the embodiment of every nightmare she has ever known. Her breath comes in quick, shallow bursts, and her gaze darts from his face to the bracelet bound to his wrist, as if expecting it to suddenly unravel. Some unspeakable horror. The language barrier looms between them, a wall of sound and meaning that neither can breach, yet her emotions are raw, palpable, flowing from her in waves that crash against him. Even without words, he can feel the sheer weight of her panic, confusion, and something deeper, something rooted in ancient traditions he could never hope to understand. He takes a tentative step back, with the stone beneath his feet grinding against itself, sending echoes throughout the cavernous ruin. Her head snaps up, eyes narrowing, and she mirrors his movement, stepping forward. The realization dawns on him as clear as the sun piercing through storm clouds. They are connected, bound in a way that defies reason and logic. His thoughts are racing, scrambling for answers that don't exist in the databases of his ship or the annals of human exploration. He raises his hands slowly, a gesture of peace, an attempt to convey that he means no harm. But her expression hardens, lips pressing into a thin line, as if she knows that intentions mean little in the face of what has been set in motion. A low rumble reverberates through the ground, a primal growl that seems to rise from the very bowels of the planet. The girl's eyes flicker toward the darkness. Beyond the ruin's threshold, her fingers twitch, a spark of energy flaring. Between them, the color of a dying sun. She takes a defensive stance, her movements fluid, graceful, betraying a lifetime of combat training. He follows her gaze, his muscles coiling like steel springs as shadows shift and twist, forming shapes that are all too solid, monstrous figures, with eyes that gleam like polished obsidian and claws that scrape against the stone with a sickening screech. The first creature lunges forward, jaws wide and dripping with venom, but the girl is fast to her hand, shoots out a bolt of energy, slamming into the beast's chest, sending it sprawling backward in a heap of smoldering flesh. The human reacts instinctively, drawing his weapon, a sleek plasma pistol that hums to life in his grip. He fires the searing beam, carving a path through another creature, reducing it to a pile of ash and bone. Yet for every beast they fell, two more emerge, their guttural roars filling the air with a sound that curdles the blood. He feels her presence beside him, not just physically but within his mind, a flicker of resolve that bolsters his own. Every time he strikes, she moves in harmony, their actions weaving a deadly tapestry that confounds their enemies. But the realization that every injury they sustain is shared becomes painfully evident when a creature's claw grazes his arm, a shallow cut that burns like acid. Her cry of pain mirrors his own, her hand clutching at the identical wound on her forearm. Their shared pain fuels their fury, pushing them beyond their limits into a realm where instinct and intuition meld into one. Each movement becomes a statement of defiance against the fate that binds them together. The last of the beasts falls, its massive form collapsing into dust that swirls around them like the ashes of a dying star. As the adrenaline fades, the reality of their bond settles over them like a shroud. She approaches slowly, the fire in her eyes now tempered by resignation and a touch of sadness. With deliberate motions, she kneels, drawing symbols into the dirt that glow faintly in the dim light, an ancient script that speaks of fate, duty, and unbreakable ties. She points to the bracelet, then to herself, and finally to him, her fingers tracing the path of the bond that neither can sever. In the aftermath of battles, surrounded by the corpses of those who sought to end them, they stand united by a force neither of them chose. But both must now endure. The human meets her gaze, a silent pact forming between them to survive, to understand, and perhaps to find a way to defy the destiny that has been thrust upon them. The creature lunges with terrifying speed, its massive form a blur of muscle and shadow. The alien girl moves first, pulling the human back as the beast's claws slash through the air where he stood a second ago. She raises her hands, energy crackling between her fingers. Before she thrusts them forward, a shockwave erupts, slamming into the creature, but it barely staggers, its glowing eyes locked onto them with unwavering hunger. The human's instincts scream at him to fight, to pull his weapon, to strike back, but her words still echo in his mind. If you fall, I fall. He clenches his fists, jaw tightening as he forces himself to move in sync with her. She's fast, unbelievably fast, her movements precise, like she already knows what he's going to do before he does it. And somehow he feels it too, a pull deep in his chest, like a second heartbeat guiding him. The beast lunges again, this time aiming for the girl. His body moves before his mind catches up. He grabs her arm, spinning her out of the way as the creature crashes down. Between them, its claws gouging deep trenches into the stone floor. She lands lightly, eyes wide in shock before they narrow, determination hardening her expression. She flicks a hand, a pulse of energy slamming into the wall behind the beast, sending debris crashing down onto its back. It roars, shaking off the rubble, but it's slowing down, its breaths ragged, its movements no longer as quick. The human feels the change too through the bond. He can sense the ebb and flow of the fight, their shared connection, making every moment clearer, every second stretch longer. He can feel her exhaustion creeping in, but beneath it, something else, power raw, untapped, waiting to be unleashed. He meets her eyes, and in that moment, they understand. Without speaking, they move together. The girl ducks low, charging her energy into a single focused strike, while the human dashes to the side, drawing the creature's attention. For just a second, it turns toward him, And that second is all she needs. She thrusts her hands forward, energy surging outward like a tidal wave, slamming into the beast's chest with a force that shakes the entire chamber. The creature lets out a final deafening roar before its body convulses, then goes still, the glow in its eyes fading to darkness. Silence fills the ruins except for their heavy breathing. The human stares at the fallen beast, heart still pounding as the realization sinks in they won. But the victory feels fragile, as if the walls themselves are waiting to swallow them whole. The girl stumbles slightly, her energy drained, but she catches herself, shaking her head, as if forcing away the exhaustion. "We have to move," she says, her voice softer now, but no less urgent. "They will know the bond is active. Others will come worse than this." Her gaze flickers to the bracelet on his wrist, and her expression darkens. Her fear is different now, deeper, something that reaches beyond just the creatures lurking in the ruins. He nods, gripping his wrist where the bracelet still clings to his skin, smooth, metallic, unbreakable. He knows now that this isn't something he can just take off. This is something more, something bigger than either of them. She turns, heading for the exit, but hesitates, glancing back at him, her voice quieter this time, but carrying the weight of something unspoken. "You are bound to me now, human, whether you like it or not." And for the first time, he isn't sure if he should be afraid, or if this bond is the only thing keeping him alive. The ruins stretch before them, endless twisting corridors, carved with symbols that glow, faintly pulsing. With an unseen force, the alien girl moves quickly, her steps light and precise. But he can feel her hesitation through the bond, a deep unease pressing against his chest like a weight neither of them can shake. He keeps pace with her, his mind racing, the bracelet still warm against his skin and its presence impossible to ignore. Even as they move deeper into the unknown, the fight with the creature lingers in his muscles, a dull ache, but more than that, he feels something else, something unsettling. He can feel her exhaustion, not just see it in the way her shoulders tense, or the slight stagger in her step, but actually feel it in his own bones, like it's his own weakness creeping in. She glances back at him, eyes wary, as if she knows what he's thinking, and maybe she does. "You feel it now, don't you?" she says, voice barely above a whisper. "Not just my pain, but my fear, my exhaustion, my instincts, all of it." Her fingers twitch, as if resisting the urge to touch the bracelet. The bond is growing stronger, faster than it should. That means they already know. They are people, the ones she warned him about, before he can ask. Another deep rumble shakes the ground, dust raining from above. The symbols on the walls flicker, then brighten, burning with an eerie intensity. She curses under her breath, gripping his wrist tight. "We are not alone." A shadow moves ahead of them, more than one, figures emerging from the darkness, tall, armored, their weapons pulsing with the same energy that flows through her veins, their eyes locking onto the human with something between anger and disgust. One steps forward, his voice sharp and cutting like a blade in the still air. "You should not exist, human. The bond should not exist. You have defiled what is sacred. Release her now, or we will end this by force." The human tenses, instinct screaming at him to draw his weapon, but he doesn't have to look at the alien girl to know what she's thinking, what she's feeling through the bond. He senses her fury, her defiance, a storm brewing beneath the surface. Her voice, when she speaks, is steady, but her hands are trembling. "You know I cannot," she says, her gaze locked onto the warrior. Before her the bond is sealed, there is no undoing it. You know this better than anyone. The warrior's expression darkens. "Then you will both die." They strike without warning, energy blasts tearing through the ruins, forcing them to dive for cover. The human rolls behind a crumbling pillar, heart pounding. He can feel her beside him, not just hear her breath, but feel the way her mind sharpens, focusing, battle instincts honed over years of survival. He doesn't think, he moves, pushing off the ground in perfect sync with her as they dart between cover, dodging blasts that scorch the stone around them. She raises a hand, energy crackling, as she throws a counterattack, the force slamming into one of the warriors, sending him sprawling, but the others are closing in fast. She curses under her breath, turning to him. "We can't win this, not like this. We need to leave now." He doesn't argue, doesn't hesitate, just moves with her, their steps perfectly aligned as they make a break for the far corridor, dodging fire. As the ruins shake around them, the human can feel her determination surging through the bond, mixing with his own, and for the first time he understands. They are not just running for their lives, they are running because together they are something more, something dangerous, something that should not exist, and every force in this galaxy will stop at nothing to tear them apart. The ruins tremble with every blast energy, scorching the walls as the alien girl and the human sprint through the twisting corridor's shadows, stretching in all directions, their footsteps pounding against stone dust swirling in the air, their pursuers relentless, their voices sharp commands in a language he barely understands. But the meaning is clear: stop running, surrender, die. The girl grips his wrist tightly, pulling him through a narrow passage, the walls closing in around them, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Her breath comes fast and ragged, exhaustion creeping into her muscles. He can feel it like a weight pressing against his own body, his chest burning from exertion. But there's no time to stop, no time to rest. They reach a dead end, the air thick with the scent of ancient metal and dust. Her fingers dance over the wall, tracing symbols that begin to glow beneath her touch. She curses under her breath. It's locked. The human turns back, the sound of armored footsteps growing closer. No way out, no cover, nowhere to hide. Instinct takes over. He presses his back against the wall, raising his fists, ready for a fight. But the girl grabs his hand, shaking her head. No fighting means death. Not just for you, for both of us. We need to break the bond, or they will never stop coming. He looks at her, then down at the bracelet, still clamped around his wrist, its surface shifting like liquid metal, warm against his skin, pulsing with every beat of his heart. He doesn't know how to break it, doesn't even know if it can be broken. But before he can respond, the warriors appear, weapons, razor energy blades humming with lethal intent. The leader steps forward, his gaze locked onto the girl, his expression cold. You have one chance, surrender yourself to us, and the human will be spared. Resist, and you both die here. She stands, frozen, her mind racing, her emotions a whirlwind. He can feel her desperation, her fear. But beneath it, something else, something unexpected, resolve. She straightens her shoulders, lifts her chin. And for the first time since they met, she smiles. It's not a kind smile, not one of peace or surrender. It's the smile of someone who has already decided how this ends. No, she says simply, and then she moves. The air erupts with energy before the warriors can react. She raises both hands, sending a pulse of raw power through the chamber. The symbols on the walls ignite with a blinding glow, and the floor trembles beneath them. The human stumbles, but she grabs his arm, pulling him close. Don't let go, no matter what happens. The ruins crack, the walls splitting open with a deafening roar, and then the floor beneath them vanishes. They fall weightless, the human's stomach lurching as darkness swallows them whole, wind rushing past his ears, the girl's fingers still gripping his wrist tight, and then impact. They crash into something not stone, not metal, something soft, something shifting. The human gasps, struggling to catch his breath. The girl groans beside him, blinking rapidly, trying to process where they are beneath them. The ground isn't ground at all, it moves, ripples like liquid, but solid beneath their weight, glowing veins of energy pulsing beneath its surface above them. The ruins are gone, the warriors are gone, only endless sky stretches overhead, vast and filled with swerving nebulae. The girl exhales slowly, her grip on his wrist tightening for a brief second before she lets go, looking around, her eyes wide with something between awe and disbelief. This isn't possible, she whispers. This place, it only exists in legend, a sanctuary, a refuge for those bound by the unbreakable bond. The human watches, her chest rising and falling, her breath unsteady, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. Then he looks down at his wrist, at the bracelet, still pulsing against his skin. Unbreakable, he repeats the word, tasting its meaning on his tongue, and for the first time since this began, he truly understands there is no going back. The air hums with energy, thick and ancient, the ground beneath them shifting like liquid stone, yet holding firm under their weight. The human pushes himself up, heart pounding as he takes in the endless horizon, swirling with light and color. No sky, no sun, only a vast expanse of nebulae twisting and pulsing. Like a living thing, the alien girl kneels beside him, her silver hair flowing weightlessly around her, as if caught in an invisible current, her violet eyes wide with disbelief. This place should not exist. She presses a hand against the shifting ground, her fingers trembling. The human feels the pulse beneath them, not just through his skin, but through the bond an energy vast and old, as if the very fabric of this world is alive. It responds to her touch, glowing where her fingers press symbols, forming and fading in an instant, as if whispering secrets only she can hear. She looks up at him, and for the first time since they met, he sees something new in her expression, not fear, not frustration, not panic, but awe. "You don't understand," she whispers. "This is a place of legend, a sanctuary created for those who bear the unbreakable bond. But no one has seen it for centuries. It was thought to be a myth." Her voice catches, and when she speaks again, it is barely above a breath, yet here we are. The human exhales slowly, his mind struggling to keep up. First the bracelet, then the bond, then the warriors hunting them, and now this, a hidden sanctuary existing outside of time and space, all because he made one simple mistake. He put on the bracelet. Before he can respond, the ground shifts beneath them, a slow ripple like the surface of a great ocean. Something awakens. A voice echoes through the air, deep and resonant, not spoken with words, but felt within their very bones. Who enters the sanctuary of the bound? The alien girl stiffens, her breath catching, her eyes darting around the empty space, but there is no source, no figure, no being, only the vast swirling energy surrounding them. The human feels it too, a presence vast and ancient, watching, waiting, judging. She swallows hard, forcing herself to speak. "I am Lysara of the Elarin. He is human. We bear the unbreakable bond. The bracelet has chosen him." Silence stretches long and heavy, the energy in the air thickening, pressing down on them. Then the voice returns. The bond has been sealed, and yet it is incomplete. Lysara's breath stutters, confusion flashing across her face. Incomplete. But that's not possible. Once the bond is formed, it cannot be undone. The energy pulses again, the shifting ground beneath them, beginning to glow. The human tenses, as the warmth in his wrist spreads, crawling up his arm, coiling around his chest. His vision blurs for a moment, and then he feels it, not just his own thoughts, not just his own heartbeat, but hers, deeper, stronger, her fears, her doubts, her memories. The sanctuary is showing them something, revealing something. The voice speaks again. The bond must be completed or broken. There is no in-between. Lysara's grip tightens on her own wrist, her eyes dark with realization. She turns to the human, her voice low, urgent. "We are not just connected, we are merging." The human's pulse spikes, the weight of her words crashing into him. Merging, what does that even mean? He already feels everything she does, already knows her emotions, as if they are his own. But this is something more permanent, something irreversible. Lysara's expression shifts, something unreadable passing across her face. "If we do not complete the bond, they will find us. If we do, we will no longer be separate." The human stares at her, the truth settling deep in his chest. They are running out of time, the choice must be made. But once they decide, there is no turning back. The energy thickens, pressing against them. Like a living force, the human feels his own heartbeat, but also hers, a rhythm that is no longer separate. Their thoughts swirl together, fragments of memories, sensations, emotions bleeding across the bond. Lysara grips her wrist, her fingers trembling, as if trying to hold something back. But it is already happening. The sanctuary is demanding a choice. The bond must be completed or broken, the voice repeats. And this time the ground beneath them shifts, rising in slow waves of light. The human exhales slowly, his body tense, the warmth of the bracelet crawling up his arm, reaching into his chest, a force beyond his understanding. Lysara meets his gaze, her violet eyes unreadable, her voice steady, but laced with something he cannot name. "If we complete the bond, we become one," she says, "no longer two minds, but a single force intertwined forever. We will feel what the other feels, think what the other thinks. There will be no more division." The human swallows, his throat dry. "And if we break it?" Lysara's breath stutters, her fingers curling into fists. Breaking the bond means shattering the connection, severing what has already begun. She closes her eyes for a moment, and when she speaks again, her voice is barely above a whisper. "It would be painful, permanent, it might even kill us." The ground shifts again, light coiling around their feet, the sanctuary growing impatient, waiting, watching, testing. The human clenches his jaw. A part of him wants to fight against it, to reject this unseen force controlling his fate. But another part of him knows there is no fighting this. The bracelet chose him. The bond is real. He can feel it in every breath, every pulse of his heart, and hers entwined in ways he never thought possible. Lysara takes a step closer, her expression softer now, no longer a warrior, no longer just an alien trapped by fate, but something else, something raw. I was never meant to bond with a human, she says. Quietly, our species were never meant to mix the others. We'll never accept this, but I cannot break it. The human searches her face, his own emotions tangled with hers. He feels her fear, but also something else, something she is afraid to name. The sanctuary pulses, the voice deep and final. Choose. Lysara reaches for his hand, her fingers barely brushing against his. The warmth spreads deeper, pulling them together, not just physically, but in a way that has no words. The human takes a breath and lets it out slowly. Then we finish it. The moment he says it, the energy sylloges wrapping around them like a storm. Light bursts from the bracelet, spreading across their bodies, tendrils of warmth and power twisting through their veins. His mind stretches, his thoughts merging into hers into his, the barrier between them shattering, until there is no longer a distinction between human and alien, only them together. The sanctuary hums a deep, approving resonance, the ground beneath them, stabilizing the nebulae above, swirling faster, brighter, until the entire space is filled with light, and then silence. Lysara blinks, her breath uneven, her fingers still curled around his wrist, her thoughts no longer separate from his. The human stares at her and feels everything, not just her emotions, but her very being, as if he is looking at himself through her eyes. It is done, the voice fades, the sanctuary stills, and they are left standing in the vast quiet, forever changed. The silence stretches vast and endless, but his not empty. The human feels everything, not just his own breath, but Lysara's, the weight of her presence, no longer separate from his thoughts, emotions, instincts, blending in ways he cannot unravel. He blinks, but it does not feel like only his eyes opening. He moves, but it is not only his body shifting. The bond is complete, the barrier between them gone. Lysara stares at him, and he knows what she is thinking, because he is thinking it too. Their minds are not just linked, they are fused. Where he ends, she begins. Where she hesitates, he knows. While there is no longer room for deception, no way to mask fear or hide truths, he feels her past, as if he lived it, the training, the discipline, the loneliness of carrying a burden she never asked for. He feels the moment she first saw him, the frustration, the confusion, the slow creeping realization that she was no longer alone. Her lips part slightly, her voice barely of a whisper. I can hear you even when you don't speak. The human exhales, slowly nodding, I know. They stand in the glowing expanse, a sanctuary pulsing softly around them, as if sensing the shift, acknowledging the choice that has been made. There is no pain, no struggle, only the quiet certainty that nothing will ever be the same. Then the air shifts, a ripple of energy sweeping through the space. The human tenses, feeling it in his bones, in Lysara's bones, in the shared space. Between them, the sanctuary is reacting, preparing, changing. Lysara stiffens, her eyes darkening. They know. He doesn't need to ask who, he already knows. The others, the warriors, the ones who would rather see them dead than accept what has happened. They would have felt the bond's completion, known that the choice was made, and they would not stand idly by. We have to move, she says, urgency threading through her voice. The sanctuary hums beneath their feet, energy shifting, patterns forming in the ground, symbols appearing and fading like waves on the surface of water. Lysara steps forward, pressing her palm against one of the glowing shapes. The human feels the pulse of it through her fingertips, through his own, as if the energy itself is speaking to them. A path opens ahead of them, a corridor of swirling light leading into the unknown. Lysara hesitates only for a second, then she turns back to him, her expression firm. But there is something else there too, something softer, something that wasn't there before. Are you ready, she asks, but they both already know the answer. He nods. They step forward together and the light swallows them whole. For a moment, there is nothing but motion, weightless and endless, the sensation of being pulled through space without direction. Then the world reforms around them, the sanctuary fades, and they are somewhere else. The air is thick with humidity, the scent of earth and metal filling their lungs. The human steadies himself, scanning the surroundings. They are in a dense jungle, massive trees stretching into a sky that is neither day nor night, vines twisting like living veins of energy, the ground damp beneath their boots. Lysara exhales slowly, looking around, her expression wary but focused. This is the outer rim of the lost worlds, she murmurs. No one has set foot here in centuries. A shiver runs through the human's spine. He does not know why, but he feels it too, a presence lingering in the air, something watching, waiting. Then a sound cuts through the stillness. A deep, low vibration, not mechanical, not natural, something in between. Lysara's hand moves to her weapon, her stance shifting. The human follows instinctively, his muscles tensing. We are not alone. The sound grows louder, a deep resonance, vibrating through the jungle, leaves shuddering in response, the ground pulsing beneath their feet, like the heartbeat of something vast and unseen. The human grips his weapon, but he already knows it will not be enough. Whatever is coming is not something he can fight with steel or bullets. Lysara steps forward, her breath steady, but he can feel the tension in her body, in her thoughts. They are not alone, and whatever watches them is not just a hunter. It is something ancient, something that has waited for them specifically. The vines shift, twisting like living things, the air thick with energy that hums against their skin, not just around them but inside them, flowing through the bond, through their veins, through the very core of their being. The jungle is responding to them because they do not belong here, or perhaps because they do. The human swallows, his pulse hammering, but it is not fear, not entirely. It is something deeper, something he cannot name, something that stirs in the space between himself and Lysara, in the connection that has made them more than they were before. A voice ripples through the air, but it is not spoken, it is felt. You are bound. The words are not words, but a presence, a force pressing against their minds, against the bond. Lysara straightens her jaw tight. She does not answer with words, but with her presence, her resolve. The human feels it within himself, as if it were his own, and perhaps now it is. The jungle shifts around them, the trees parting of their own accord, revealing a massive structure half buried in the earth, its surface covered in glowing symbols that pulse with the same rhythm as their hearts, as the bracelet on his wrist. This was built for the bound. Lysara whispers, all creeping into her voice. Before time, before war, before my people forgot. The human exhales slowly, understanding settling over him. This is not just a place, it is a test, a doorway, a final step, in something neither of them fully understands yet, but something inevitable, something they were always meant to reach. The air crackles, the presence watching them, growing stronger, waiting for them to move, waiting for them to decide. Lysara turns to him, and he knows the question in her mind, because it is in his as well. Do we enter? There is no hesitation, no fear, only certainty. They have come this far, they have defied fate itself to stand here, and now the path is before them, waiting. He nods. They step forward together, the structure reacting instantly, the symbols flaring to life, the ground trembling beneath their feet, as the entrance yawns open, revealing a corridor of shifting light and shadow. The presence speaks again, this time not a warning, but something else, something deeper. You are the first. The human clenches his fists, stepping beside Lysara as they cross the threshold, the jungle disappearing behind them, swallowed by darkness, the entrance ceiling shut with a final pulse of energy, locking them inside. The corridor stretches forward, endless yet familiar, every step echoing in the silence, the weight of the place pressing against them, but it does not push them back, it pulls them forward. Lysara's breath is steady, her mind brushing against his through the bond, and he feels what she feels, the realization settling into them. Both, this is not an end. It is a beginning.